So what is escrow? I know you've probably heard about escrow from movies or anyone who's talking about real estate, but it's hard to understand what it actually is until you might go through it yourself. So in this video, I'm going to describe what escrow is, explain to you why it exists in the first place, and if you stay till the end, you'll find out how to make sure your escrow period goes perfectly when you're buying a house. Hey everybody, this is Brad Decatur with the Decatur Real Estate Group. Thanks for tuning in. So like I said, we're going to go through what the word escrow actually means. So first off, in real estate, escrow is referred to as both a timeline and an actual thing. So it's kind of hard when someone says we're in escrow. I understand that doesn't make a lot of sense. When they use it in that fashion, we are in escrow, it makes it sound like a thing. But then some people say, we're getting out of escrow, we're going through an escrow period. So it can be a little bit confusing to what it actually means. But escrow is really an actual thing, person, place. It's a company is what it is. It's a third-party company. Escrow is the one who actually houses the transaction, and they make sure that the transaction goes smoothly, and they have what we call escrow instructions. So they're basically there to make sure that the whole transaction goes smoothly and that everything goes how it's supposed to go. People get paid when they're supposed to get paid. All the T's are crossed, I's are dotted on the contract. They make sure if there's any hiccups on the contract, maybe the seller, forgot to initial one time on the bottom of page 7. They will be the ones that see that and say, hey, can you guys get this signed for us? This needs to be all legitimate for us to go ahead and close. So escrow is also referred to as a time frame. So when someone says we're in escrow, they're not saying they're in this escrow building. That just means the time frame from when you get in contract. So if you wrote an offer and got in contract until the time that you close and actually get the keys to the house and are the homeowners. So that is the typical time frame you're in escrow. Typically that time frame is about 30, 45 days. In this market right now, it's definitely 30 days, maybe a little bit sooner. But for VA loans or some other long-term feasibility study type stuff, you could be in escrow for a lot longer. But on a typical home purchase, you're going to be in escrow for about 30 days, and that is the escrow time frame. So what does escrow do? Why are they even there in the first place? I'm glad you asked. So the reason that they're there is really for protection and collusion, making sure that everything's going right. The most important thing they do, they do a lot of things, but the most important thing they do is they house the money. They make sure that the transaction goes smooth. There's lots of paperwork, lots of moving parts. They do a ton of stuff, but the money is the most important thing. And I would say that's the main reason why they exist. Because a lawyer or even a real estate agent could probably get the house and the loan, the whole thing closed just fine. But when it's between one buyer and one seller and they each have an agent representing them, we don't want to actually pay the seller directly. Like, okay, we're buying the house. Here's $500,000. It's a little bit risky, and so this is the third-party company, and they're unbiased, and they actually house the money and make sure it's distributed the correct way when we are actually fully recorded with the county. And there's a lot of different checkpoints throughout escrow that there's some money exchanging as well. So the first thing is that the earnest money deposit typically is going to be deposited within the first 48 hours of the contract from the buyer. So when the buyer makes this earnest money deposit, they don't just give it to the seller to hang on to. That would be kind of risky, right? So they could skip town, scratch the contract up, whatever. If it's not being held and being documented, then stuff like that could happen. So when the buyer sends the earnest money, they send it to escrow. And escrow, and remember, this is an actual company, right? So there's a lot of those big names you've probably heard of: Chicago Title and Escrow, First American, Modus. There's tons of different companies that are doing it, but they are the actual escrow company that's housing the transaction. So they hold on to that earnest money because they're the ones that get to decide when to distribute that and for what reason. So in a normal transaction, of course, the buyers are going to close in about 30 days. At that point, the earnest money that has been deposited and just kind of sitting there, it's going to be credited towards them, towards their purchase. But it's held with escrow to make sure that they have something at stake for them to actually close this deal and uphold their part of the contract. So if the buyer were to breach contract, well, there'd probably be a little bit of a dispute, of course, but in the end, if the seller had a right to that earnest money, then escrow would send the earnest money to them. Another part we need escrow for the money side of things is because of the lender. So in a cash purchase, this is a little bit different, but when there's a lender involved, the lender is usually wiring a significant amount of money to get this deal done. If you're buying a $500,000 house, the lender might be paying 400 of it, right up front. You're getting a loan for that actual money. When you get a loan from a lender, they actually do take that 400,000 and give it to escrow to actually close that deal, which then they send it to the seller for their net proceeds, because they're selling the house. They are due the money that the buyer is paying for it, but it's all held in escrow first, and then the seller gets their $500K net proceeds. Some other things that escrow do have to do with the title work. Title and escrow is the same company, so escrow will also be a part of kind of working on the title. So the title rep will pull the preliminary title, make sure there's no liens or encumbrances on the property that need to be addressed. Sometimes there could be a contractor lien from 10 years ago, or maybe they have back taxes, or maybe even like an easement dispute, property line dispute. Those are all things that would show up on title. And if those things are issues, then escrow is going to be involved with coordinating getting this thing resolved. So they're going to inform the agents and the buyers and the sellers of what's going on, and we're going to have to figure out how to resolve that. So they're involved in the title process. And then all the paperwork, they actually are in charge of recording that paperwork with the county. So getting your final recording number and getting like the deed, that's done through escrow. So us agents and the buyers and sellers, they're not actually doing it themselves. They have to sign it, but escrow is the one taking care of that and sending it to King County or whatever county you live in and getting the sale recorded so that we can actually close the deal. So my bonus tip for you guys, a couple of things. If you are buying a house, obviously if you're watching this video and typed in what is escrow, you're at least thinking about it. If you are buying a house and you get your offer accepted, and then you of course are getting into escrow, you're in this escrow period for 30 days, to make sure that that goes as smooth as possible for you, there's definitely a few tips and tricks that I want to share with you. So first off, make sure you have a very good agent who has great communication skills. The escrow company is going to communicate with you back and forth like directly, email and phone calls, but they're also going to talk to the agent quite a lot as well. So the way I like to do things is, the escrow can talk to my buyer as much as they want if it has to do with what they're doing, but they're also going to usually CC me on everything. So I think of myself as the middleman for all those conversations, just because a lot of the stuff that they send to the buyers, they can be confusing, and a lot of times they have questions. So I like to kind of stay ahead of the curve. So if I get something from them that I know might be a little complicated or confusing, they might have questions, I'll just set up a call or send an email to the buyers explaining what's going on so that they always feel taken care of. So obviously first, get a good agent. That's true for a lot of things, not just getting through escrow, but worth mentioning. The second thing you can do is be proactive. So these escrow companies sometimes are super, super busy. They can get backed up, right? And of course, hopefully you're working with a good one and they have good process and all that stuff. But if they're getting behind, the only way that they're gonna put you as a priority is if you make them your priority. So the agent or the buyer, you can do it yourself, but make sure you're checking in every single week, multiple times a week in most cases, especially towards the last 2 weeks. We really, really want to know what's going on in escrow so that we can fully prepare for the closing process and make sure that it's a smooth transaction throughout. Another tip is to make sure your lender is on top of their stuff. The escrow cannot close the deal without the lender's money if there's a loan. So it's super important that the lender's on top of things and they send that information, the closing disclosures, to escrow as soon as possible, because it usually takes escrow about 3 days to kind of get that file ready and have it be signed before we can record. So you always want to have your lender get the information to escrow, typically about 4 or 5 days, sometimes a week or more, before the closing date. So be on your lender for that part of the escrow process. And the last tip, which is a tough one, is if at all possible, go with the title and escrow company that your agent works with the most, because they're going to have a direct relationship. I know this obviously firsthand in real estate, that when I'm working with my team, all I have to do, I can text them, call them, FaceTime and whatever. Like, we do deals together. We work together. I give them a lot of business, so of course they want to treat me very well. So it's a really good way to get it done perfectly, because they're not going to screw up when it's my deal. So that can be true for any agent. If they have a recommendation, I'd probably go with who they work with, because they have a direct working relationship, and that's going to help make you have a better experience with the whole escrow process. Unfortunately, in this market where I'm at right now at the time of shooting, that's very, very tough to do on the buyer side. So on the buyer side, the listing agent and the seller typically list who they want to work with as far as title and escrow. And you can make an offer for whatever company you want to use, but unfortunately, they might counter you. And if it's a competitive market and they have multiple offers, you don't really want your offer. It'll probably fall behind if you're not going to agree to like what they want as far as terms go. So unfortunately, that's not always the case. If you are a seller and you're listing your property, definitely pick your own escrow company and stick to it and use someone who your agent works with a lot and trusts. Hopefully this video answered all your questions about what escrow is. If you have any more questions, put them down in the comments. I can do some more videos to kind of follow up. There's definitely a lot more to it, but keep an eye out for more videos, guys. And hey, if you like what you're seeing here, please consider subscribing and liking the video. I'm trying to grow and get this information out to more people. I'm just getting started, so I really appreciate you guys watching. And do me a favor and like and share. Thank you.